I always believed that Christmas was a time of magic and miracles. Growing up in the quiet town of Ravenswood, Michigan, the holiday season was the highlight of the year. The snow-covered streets, the warm glow of lights in every window, and the scent of pine and cinnamon created an atmosphere of pure joy. But that Christmas Eve in 1985 changed everything, unveiling a darkness I never knew existed beneath the festive veneer. My name is David Miller, and I was 32 years old when the legend of Krampus came to life in our household. My wife, Laura, and our 2 children, Emily and Jake, had always loved the holiday season. This year, we decided to go all out, decking our modest home with ornaments collected over the years and stringing up lights that bathed our living room in a warm, inviting glow. Our children were especially excited, their eyes sparkling with anticipation for Santa's arrival. As the days led up to Christmas, the town of Ravenswood buzzed with preparations for the annual Krampus parade, a relatively new tradition inspired by our European roots. The parade featured participants dressed as Krampus, the dark counterpart to Santa Claus, meant to embody the consequences of misbehavior. I found it a fascinating blend of folklore and festivity, a way to teach children the importance of good behavior through a dramatic spectacle. On Christmas Eve, the air was crisp, and snowflakes danced lazily from the sky, covering Ravenswood in a pristine white blanket. We gathered around the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa and sharing stories. The tree stood proudly in the corner, its branches heavy with ornaments and twinkling lights. The children were tucked into bed, their excitement palpable even in their slumber. Around midnight, a sense of stillness settled over our home. I was in the kitchen, checking the last of the cookies Laura had baked, when I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from the living room. At first, I dismissed it as the house settling or perhaps an animal outside. But the noise grew louder, more deliberate, like something or someone was moving within the tree. I exchanged a worried glance with Laura, who was also listening. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice tinged with unease. "Probably just the wind," I replied, though my own instincts told me otherwise. Curiosity and a growing sense of dread compelled me to investigate. I approached the living room cautiously, the scratching sound growing louder. As I drew nearer, the room seemed to grow colder, the warmth from the fireplace fading into an oppressive chill. The lights on the tree flickered erratically, casting long, twisted shadows that danced menacingly around the room. Then, I saw it, a dark, hulking figure emerging from the shadows of the tree. It was Krampus, as depicted in the folklore we'd celebrated with the parade. Massive horns curled from his head, his fur matted and tangled, sharp claws glinting ominously. His eyes burned with a malevolent light, fixated on our family with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Before I could react, Krampus lunged forward, his claws extended. Laura grabbed me by the arm, pulling me back just as he slammed into the tree, sending ornaments crashing to the floor. "Stay back, David!" she shouted, her voice trembling but resolute. Krampus paused, his gaze shifting to our children's bedrooms. I watched in horror as he began to move towards Jake's room, his steps heavy and deliberate. Emily awoke with a start, her eyes wide with fear as she saw the monstrous figure looming in the doorway. "Santa?" she whispered, clutching her teddy bear tightly. "No, sweetheart," Laura replied, stepping protectively in front of her. "That's not Santa. It's Krampus." Krampus turned his attention to us, a guttural growl emanating from his throat. "You've been naughty," he rasped, his voice a chilling echo that seemed to fill the room. "Now, face the consequences." Desperation surged through me as I realized there was no running away. We were trapped in our home, confronted by a nightmare made flesh. Laura and I stood our ground, trying to protect our children from the malevolent force before us. Emily began to cry, and I felt a surge of anger and fear. "Leave us alone," I demanded, my voice cracking with emotion. "We've always tried to do the right thing," Krampus snarled, his claws retracting slightly but his presence remaining overwhelmingly threatening. "There are those who deserve punishment," he hissed, advancing towards us. "It is my duty to ensure justice is served." Just as the situation seemed hopeless, a sudden burst of light filled the room. The front door swung open, and a group of neighbors from the Krampus parade entered, armed with homemade torches and chanting prayers. They had heard our screams and come to our aid, determined to fend off the evil that had invaded our home. Krampus recoiled, the light weakening his form but not eliminating the darkness within him. The neighbors continued their chants, their voices growing louder and more confident. Slowly, Krampus began to fade, his form disintegrating into shadows that were sucked back into the tree. With one final, defiant growl, he vanished, leaving behind a lingering sense of dread. Breathing heavily, we looked around at our neighbors, grateful for their timely intervention. The room felt warmer, the oppressive chill lifted, and the tree stood still, its ornaments now peaceful and undisturbed. The children huddled close, tears streaming down their faces as they clung to their parents. In the aftermath, we learned that the tree we had chosen was indeed cursed. Legends spoke of an ancient ritual performed in Pinewood Forest, where Krampus was invoked to punish the wicked. Somehow, the tree had become a conduit for his dark presence, tethering him to our home each Christmas Eve. Determined to break the curse, we sought the help of a local historian and an experienced medium. Together, we returned to Pinewood Forest, the heart of the legend that had haunted our lives. Under a full moon, we performed a cleansing ritual, honoring the traditions that had been twisted by dark forces. The air grew thick with energy as we chanted prayers and burned sacred herbs, the tree serving as the focal point of our efforts. As dawn broke, the atmosphere shifted, the oppressive presence dissipated, replaced by a sense of peace and closure. We returned home, hopeful that the curse had been lifted. The following Christmas was peaceful, the tree a symbol of our resilience and the triumph of light over darkness. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls through the trees and shadows dance across the walls, I catch a glimpse of something moving just beyond the edge of my vision, a reminder that some legends are born from truth, and some evils never truly die. So, as you gather with your loved ones this holiday season, remember our story, cherish each moment, embrace the light, and be wary of the shadows that linger just beyond the glow of the festive lights. For in the heart of every Christmas lies both joy and darkness, and it is our duty to protect the magic that makes this season truly special. Story number 2. I've always believed that the magic of Christmas was invincible, a shield against the darkness of the world. Growing up in the suburban sprawl of Newark, New Jersey, Christmas was a time of warmth, laughter, and the comforting presence of Santa Claus. But Christmas Eve of 1980 shattered that belief, unveiling a nightmare that forever altered my perception of the holiday season. My name is Jonathan Turner, and I was 28 years old when the legend of the murderous Santa Claus began. I lived in a modest home on Maple Street with my wife, Sarah, and our 7-year-old daughter, Emily. Our Christmas traditions were simple yet cherished, decorating the tree together, baking cookies, and eagerly awaiting Santa's arrival. That year, however, our joyous celebrations were tainted by an unspeakable horror. It was a chilly December evening, the kind where snowflakes danced lazily from the sky, covering our neighborhood in a pristine white blanket. We had just finished decorating our tree, its branches adorned with colorful ornaments and twinkling lights. Emily was tucked into bed, dreaming of Santa's gifts, while Sarah and I sat by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa and reminiscing about Christmases past. Around midnight, a loud knock echoed through our home, startling us both. Sarah glanced at me, her eyes wide with concern. "Who could that be at this hour?" she whispered. I walked to the front door, peering through the peephole. There, standing on our porch, was a man dressed as Santa Claus. His suit was immaculate, his beard perfectly groomed, and his eyes held an unsettling intensity that didn't match the jolly image we were accustomed to. Without a word, he stood there, as if expecting us to invite him in. "Hello," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady despite the unease creeping up my spine. To my surprise, the man smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Merry Christmas," he replied, his voice calm but cold. Sarah and I exchanged nervous glances. "Come in, Santa," I said hesitantly, stepping aside to let him enter. The moment he crossed the threshold, a chill swept through the house, extinguishing the warm glow of the fireplace. The atmosphere grew heavy, the air thick with an inexplicable tension. The man didn't speak further. He simply stood there, his gaze fixed on us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Is there something you need?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. The man nodded slowly, reaching into his sack. Instead of gifts, he pulled out a small, ornate box, placing it gently on the coffee table. "I have something for Emily," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. Confused, I glanced at Sarah before turning my attention to Emily's bedroom door. "She's asleep, Santa. You should go." He didn't respond. Instead, his expression darkened, and his demeanor shifted. The warmth that once defined Santa Claus was replaced by an icy coldness that sent shivers down my spine. Without warning, he pulled out a gleaming knife from his belt, the metal catching the dim light of the room. "You've been naughty," he hissed, his voice now a guttural growl. "It's time for punishment." Panic surged through me as I reached for the nearest object, a heavy lamp, attempting to defend my family. "Stay back," I shouted, stepping between him and Sarah. But the man moved with unnatural speed, his eyes devoid of any humanity. He lunged at me, the knife aimed directly at my chest. I barely had time to react, pushing him away with all my strength. The knife grazed my arm, the pain sharp and immediate. But it wasn't just physical. It was as if the very essence of my being was being torn apart. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Sarah's hand and pulling her toward the back door. We stumbled through the hallway, the man in the Santa suit relentlessly pursuing us. The house seemed to warp around us, the rooms elongating and twisting as if alive with malevolent intent. We burst into the backyard, the cold night air a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness inside. Emily woke with a start, her eyes wide with fear as she saw her parents fleeing into the snow. I glanced back, only to see the man standing at our front door, his eyes burning with an unholy fire. Desperation fueled our escape as we raced down the driveway, the snow crunching beneath our feet. I didn't look back, focusing solely on getting as far away from that house as possible. The night was silent except for our frantic breaths and the pounding of our hearts. By the time we reached the safety of the neighbors' homes, the man had vanished without a trace. Exhausted and shaken, we huddled together, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Blood dripped from my arm, a stark reminder of the horror we had narrowly escaped. The police arrived shortly after, their presence a small comfort in the aftermath of our terror. They searched our home but found no evidence of the intruder. The ornate box on the coffee table was still there, untouched by the chaos. Inside, however, was something far more disturbing, a single, bloody handprint on the underside of the lid, smeared with fresh blood. Weeks turned into months, and the legend of the murderous Santa Claus took root in our community. Stories circulated of similar attacks, men dressed as Santa distributing gifts that concealed dark intentions. The holiday spirit was overshadowed by fear, parents warning their children to stay indoors on Christmas Eve, lest they fall victim to the sinister figure. But the true horror lay in the truth behind Harry, the man who had haunted our Christmas night. As I delved deeper into his past, I discovered a man broken by loss and consumed by madness. Harry had lost his family in a tragic accident years before, a loss that had twisted his mind and corrupted his soul. Obsessed with the idea of punishing those he deemed unworthy, he had donned the guise of Santa Claus to carry out his gruesome vendetta. The realization was both horrifying and heartbreaking. Harry was a man lost to his own demons, a ghostly figure perpetuating his pain through acts of unimaginable cruelty. The image of Santa Claus, once a symbol of joy and generosity, had been tainted by Harry's darkness, transforming him into a harbinger of death and fear. Our family never fully recovered from that Christmas Eve. The scars, both physical and emotional, remained, a constant reminder of the fragility of happiness and the depths of human despair. We moved away from Newark soon after, seeking a fresh start far from the haunted memories that lingered in our hearts. Years later, the story of the murderous Santa Claus remains a cautionary tale in Ravenswood, a reminder that darkness can sometimes masquerade as light, and that even the most beloved symbols can be corrupted by pain and madness. On cold, snowy nights, I sometimes find myself gazing into the distance, haunted by the memory of that night and the realization that evil can hide behind the most unexpected masks. So, as you gather with your loved ones this holiday season, cherish each moment, embrace the light, and remain vigilant, for in the heart of every celebration lies both joy and shadow, and it is our duty to protect the magic that makes Christmas truly special. Remember the Jones family and the night that forever changed their lives. A stark reminder that even in the season of miracles, darkness can descend, waiting to shatter the peace we hold so dear. Story number 3. I never imagined that a simple Christmas tradition could turn into a nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Growing up in the remote village of Pine Ridge, northern Michigan, Christmas was always a time of warmth, family gatherings, and the comforting glow of our large oak tree adorned with handmade ornaments. But Christmas Eve of 1950 shattered that idyllic image, leaving scars that time couldn't heal. My name is Samuel Jones, the eldest son of the Jones family. My parents, Henry and Margaret, had recently moved our family to Pine Ridge seeking peace and a fresh start. Our home was an old farmhouse, charming in its rustic simplicity, nestled at the edge of the dense woods that surrounded our village. It was our first Christmas in this new place, and excitement buzzed through every corner of our modest home. On Christmas Eve, the family gathered around the dinner table, enjoying a hearty meal of roast beef, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce. The fireplace crackled, casting a warm glow that danced on the walls. My younger sister, Mary, and I were busy decorating the tree in the living room, hanging ornaments we'd collected over the years and stringing up lights that bathed the room in a festive light. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and the joyous anticipation of Santa's arrival. My parents exchanged smiles, grateful for the opportunity to create new memories in our new home. Little did we know, the night was about to take a dark and terrifying turn. Around midnight, as we were about to retire for the night, a loud knock echoed through the house. Henry glanced at the clock. 12:05 a.m. It was unusually late for visitors, especially on Christmas Eve. Concerned, he walked to the front door, wondering who could be visiting at such an hour. Opening the door, Henry was greeted by a man dressed as Santa Claus. His red suit was immaculate, his beard perfectly groomed, and his eyes held an unsettling intensity that didn't match the jolly demeanor we'd come to expect from Santa. Without a word, the man stepped inside, and an immediate chill filled the room, despite the roaring fire. "Welcome," he said, his voice calm but cold, as if masking a deeper, darker intent. We welcomed him in, assuming he might be a neighbor or someone needing assistance. The man didn't engage in conversation, merely stood there, his gaze fixed on us with an eerie stillness. As minutes passed, the atmosphere grew tense, the warmth of the fire seeming to wane under his presence. Without warning, the man's facade crumbled. He reached into his coat and pulled out a gleaming knife, the blade catching the light in a way that made it look almost too sharp, too menacing. Panic surged through me as he lunged forward, his movements swift and precise. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Mary's hand and pulling her away from the table. Henry and Margaret reacted instinctively, trying to shield us from the attacker's reach. But the man was relentless, his eyes devoid of any compassion as he struck out with deadly force. The chaos that ensued was a blur of fear and violence. Screams echoed through the house as the man attacked with brutal efficiency, leaving no room for mercy. In mere moments, our once peaceful home was transformed into a scene of horror. By the time the nightmare ended, the room was silent, the man having vanished without a trace, leaving behind a lifeless and shattered family. The police arrived swiftly, their presence a small comfort in the midst of our devastation. They combed through the house, searching for clues, but found nothing to explain the tragedy. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle, and no fingerprints or identification on the man. The only clue was the bloodied knife, now stained beyond recognition, and the chilling question of who or what had committed such a heinous act. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the man in the Santa suit was not an ordinary criminal. He was connected to a string of unsolved robberies that had plagued neighboring towns over the past few months. Each crime scene bore the same eerie signature: a man dressed as Santa Claus, committing murders with cold precision and disappearing into the night without a trace. The town was gripped with fear, the legend of the murderous Santa Claus taking on a life of its own. Parents warned their children to stay inside on Christmas Eve, afraid that the sinister figure might come for them too. The festive spirit was overshadowed by a pervasive sense of dread, the joyous lights now tainted by the memory of that horrific night. But the nightmare didn't end with our family's tragedy. In the days that followed, authorities discovered something even more disturbing. At the scene of our home, they found the Christmas tree, beautifully decorated, yet eerily untouched by the violence that had unfolded around it. Among the ornaments, hidden beneath the branches, was a small, ornate box. When opened, it revealed a gruesome sight: a human thumb, cleanly severed and placed as a macabre decoration. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, fueling rumors and dark speculations. Some believed that the tree itself was cursed, a conduit for the evil that had claimed our lives. Others whispered about the possibility of a supernatural force, an entity that thrived on the fear and tragedy of Christmas. As months turned into years, the legend of the murderous Santa Claus became a local folklore, a cautionary tale told around fireplaces and in hushed tones. Pine Ridge attempted to reclaim its festive spirit, but the shadow of that Christmas Eve lingered, a dark reminder of the fragility of joy and the ever-present possibility of evil lurking beneath the surface. I moved away from Pine Ridge shortly after the tragedy, seeking a new beginning far from the haunted memories of my past. But no matter how far I ran, the images of that night, the lifeless faces of my family, the bloodied knife, and the enigmatic presence of the man in the Santa suit remained etched in my mind. They resurfaced in my dreams, relentless and unforgiving, a constant reminder of the darkness that can descend even in the most sacred of times. Years later, I still hear stories of strange occurrences during Christmas in remote towns, tales of sinister figures masquerading as beloved holiday icons. While some dismiss them as mere urban legends, I know the truth: evil can take many forms, and sometimes, the symbols of our greatest joys can become the harbingers of our deepest fears. So, as you gather with your loved ones this holiday season, cherish each moment, embrace the light, and remain vigilant, for in the heart of every celebration lies both joy and darkness. And it is our duty to protect the magic that makes this season truly special. Remember the Jones family and the night that forever changed our lives. A stark reminder that even in the warmth of Christmas, shadows can lurk, waiting to descend upon us when we least expect it.